Hello everybody, this is Evan with Tabletop Gaming Guild. Today I am bringing you a review of Plains Indian War by GMT Games. Let's go down to the tabletop. I'm going to show you some of the components, kind of the example of how to play the game, and then I'll bring it back up, give you my final thoughts, alright? Alright everybody, so we're down here onto the tabletop to show you Plains Indian War. So I have this map partially rolled out here. I do not have it all the way out because there's no way I can fit it into my recording area. It's 3 foot long and I don't feel like trying to figure out how to mount my camera on the ceiling, so we're going with this little section here. You can see it's a real beautiful map. The outside is really nicely laid out. The overlay of the map itself is really well drawn. They have some nice information on both sides here. This is the native side on this side, the US players on the other side here. And then components wise, so you have the custom die for each faction here, and then you have cubes representing all the units for each side. So let me put these over here and organize them a little bit. So the green represents the northern natives here. Orange is the southern natives. Purple is natives down from Mexico or up from Canada area. They're actually controlled by the U.S. players. They're enemies of the northern and southern tribes. So white represents wagon trains. They're heading west. You can see the faint white onto the board here. They follow these trails heading out. Brown is settlers, so they're the ones that are primarily responsible to build the Transcontinental Railroad, which is represented by this right here. It goes all the way from one end of the map to the other, and you're trying to build it from both ends, and they're supposed to come together. Blue is the U.S. Cavalry. So, the game is primarily played using cards to drive when it is your turn, and how you determine whose turn it is. It is a bag here and these discs. So on the turn here, you pull out a disc from the bag, and whoever's color it is, they will proceed with their turn. So most of them are pretty self-explanatory. So if it's the green, the blue, the orange, or the brown, it's just straight up that player will play cards out of their hands, which I'll go over here in a bit, and I'll show you some of the cards. They'll play those, move, attack if there's any attacks in there. So these three are kind of special here. So white represents, as I said, the wagon trains that are heading west. So whenever the white one comes out, all the wagon trains just move one square further, and two new ones come out onto the other side of the board. And the trail actually splits there. They can take the northern and the southern here, and actually splits again right here. So there's a couple ways for them to come off the board. And for the US player too, this is a victory point if they can get them off this side of the board. And also the natives, if they can destroy the wagons, which is actually kind of hard to do from the playthrough that I did, they get a point for everyone that they destroy. So purple, as we said, was enemies of the natives here, coming from these areas. They don't use a card at all. Theirs is very, very basic. Of they get a reinforcement they can activate, and they can move, and that's pretty much it. Like, just a little bit. They're more designed as harassment for the native players. And then the black cube. So the black cube is the building of the railroad. So the railroad has to be built by the settlers. So it has to be built along the line here. So wherever the last cube is in this line, so I didn't pull out a whole bunch, but let's say it's going this way, and we had 3 settlers here. The black cube came out. So on this end, we can place more cubes as represented to the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. On any given turn, you can build 6 total. Has to be 3 on one end, 3 on the other, and that's the most that you can place on one end at a time. So there are special ones here that have the M on it. So that's the railroad actually going through the Rocky Mountains. You actually have to roll die instead of just straight up placing it. So use the settler die. Roll the die, they have symbols on them. So like these are hits when you attack, and then there's also a symbol on here called the broken arrow. It's treaties. I'll talk about more about that here in a little bit when we talk about the conflict. But the settlers roll their 2 die. As long as they get a symbol, that means that they are able to put a cube into the mountain space. It's representing the struggle that they had to build the railroad underneath the Rocky Mountains. A lot of dynamiting and pickaxing to get through there. It was slow going. So that's a good representation of that as it built. It was a lot smoother sailing once it got through the plains because it was flat. If you've ever traveled through Kansas, you know it's flat corn. Corn wasn't there at this time, but it was still pretty flat. As we go back and we talk about if your disc was pulled out, you get to play cards, and that represents what you do on this turn. So I'm just going to grab the green deck here. So every deck is 15 cards. And there are 2 types of cards. There are event cards, and then there's the activation cards. The natives, they call them war parties. The settlers, they call migration. And the U.S. cavalry, they call engagement. But they work, all of them work exactly the same. So events are just straight up something happens, you just follow the text onto the event card. The war party, settlement, migration, that's it, or the engagement cards, follow this format. So you add cubes. It gives you how many groups, which is this is a group. Oh, I should probably move that. This is called a group here. And then how far you can move them. So regions are just the areas there. So reinforcements, you would start. So this one says you can do reinforce by 4 cubes. So you have to pull them here from up here, which is called your ready box. So this is where all your cubes sit in their available reinforcements. So you pull them from there, and you can put them in any of your territories that you own. So territories are represented, if you're the natives, by your area in color. The cavalry and the settlers, they have a box on each side. They have to go into that, and once they can deploy out from there at the end of the railway. So that's why it's important to keep track of where the railway is, because it starts way back here on both sides, but as it slowly builds out, your starting area is now going to be further and further in. Now, as you pull stuff out of your ready box, you're eventually going to deplete available resources. That as your units die, they go in this area called the casualty box. So when you run out of reinforcements in your ready box, you can take one of the group activations and take the casualties from here, put them back into your ready box. They won't be available to be used that round because you have to add your reinforcements first. So you have to kind of strategize on how am I going to prepare myself for next round every turn. As you watch, depletion of units you have, watch your casualties grow. You have to always keep that in mind. You have to stay 1 turn ahead to make sure you have more units, because at any point, if you do not have enough in here, you use all that you have, and then anything else is just forfeited that round. You can't just pull from somewhere else. You have to have it available. If you don't, you use up what you can, and that's it. So you have to watch that. So at any point that you get opposing, let's say we have this happening in here in Denver, some natives have ambushed some U.S. cavalry. So that's where the die come in. Combat's super, super simple. Whatever sides are involved in the conflict, so the natives have the green and the orange there, so they're going to be rolling those die. The cavalry's going to be rolling these die. You roll them together, correspond to the hits. So blue got 1 hit, so the natives have to take 1 casualty. Likewise, The natives got 1 hit, so the cavalry has to take 1 casualty. The blanks, after casualties are divvied out, blanks you can relocate up a unit per blank. So you could take and just move out. You have to move to a either neutral, non-owned area or a friendly area. So you can't move it and go to an area that has more enemies. And then the attacker then decides, do they want to continue the fight or not? If they do not, they have to move out of, if there's any units left into this. Now if they want to stay, they'll continue combat. Now the other thing that can show up onto the die is the broken arrows that, like I said, those are what's called treaty. So what a treaty means is all hits, all of them are negated. They aren't counted. And then whoever has the most strength, the most units in the territory, they can move all of the defending to a square of their choice. Now they can't move them into like, another square that has more enemy units. They can't do that, but they can move them somewhere else. Now, if there are no legal moves that you can move them to, then they're removed out and they go, I believe, into the casualty box. I'd have to double check that, and we'll put what I find out into the show notes for that. So that's combat in a nutshell for it. Real basic and easy to kind of figure out there. Now, end of game is figured out if the Transcontinental Railroad is complete. That ends the game. Or, since there's only 15 cards, as soon as one player has played the last card in their deck, the cubes are pulled for the rest of that round, and that's the last round. So you have to be kind of conscious of cards that people play. So, and because of that, your cards don't come back. So as you play them, they're used, they're done. That's it. So there's a ton of different victory points in the game. They're all located here on each side of the map. I'm not really going to go into them because there's like the natives have 7 different things that gives them points or takes away points. The U.S. player has, I think, 4. So, but they're all it's all right there, right in front of you at all times too. And they give you this really cool player aid. That gives you a sequence of play, and the dice shows you your probabilities of getting stuff. So you can see the natives themselves. They get 2 that do damage, and then 1 treaty. The cavalry get 3 to do damage, 1 treaty. So they're the best fighters of them. The natives are average. The settlers, not good at all. And then for movement, here's a whole thing of how the different cubes move into it. So that's the game kind of in a nutshell here. So I'm going to take you up from the table here and give you my final thoughts. Alright, so back up from the tabletop here. So final thoughts on Plains Indian War. So the theme of the game is really strong. They did a really good job integrating that into the game. If you ever played a cube-based game before, it's almost identical to almost all the other ones into it. It's really just how they implemented the theme onto it, and they did a really good job of that here. So if this part of history kind of interests you and you want something that's not super heavy to play, this will be a good game for you. I liked it. It had a couple things that I didn't like into it. Mostly just how the rule book was laid out. It wasn't really the best into it. There was a lot of referencing and cross-referencing to get certain points across that you needed to figure out. But other than that, overall, the game played pretty well. What's also really nice into this game, it is soloable. There is a solo mode into the game there, so you can play this by yourself if you want to. It's a whole separate rule book for you to kind of go into and figure out how to play that, but you could do this easily with this game since it's designed for it. But this is our review here for Plains Indian War, so if you like our content, definitely hit that subscribe button. Anything you want to see more of, hit us up in the comments. Tell us what you think about that. And until later, have a great day.